Thanks for tuning in for another episode of our series of CIRP's mental health webinars. Enjoy and let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
Hi everyone, glad you could join us again this week. We've done a little bit of a different format this week. We're doing no presentation as such, but more of a Q&A, which we're quite excited about. My name's Vicky. I'm the Executive Director of Construction Industry Rehab Plan, and I'm joined here today by Lindsay. Over to you, Lindsay.
Mike. Hi there, I'm Lindsay and I'm with the BC Centre for Women in the Trades, which is a partnership of women from the trades, industry and labour committed to creating a culture of diversity, equity and inclusion in the trades and other underrepresented sectors. So excited to be here today.
Oh, working from home, got a dog barking in the background. Yeah, so today we haven't got a presentation today, but we thought we'd do a Q&A. And so what we're really relying on is you guys in the audience to ask us anything you want around mental health and substance use, any issues at all. I'll start by asking Lindsay, actually. So Lindsay, is there any common questions that you often get asked or common themes that tend to come up when you're working with women in the trades?
Well, yeah, and actually one of them that I really did want to bring to you today, because it is specific to your work and your organization, is a lot of tradeswomen actually don't know anything about how to access addiction-related services. And particularly through an organization like CIRP, they don't know if they are able to access it through their union or how that all works. So maybe you could tell us a bit more about if you are struggling with addiction, what do you do?
This is actually a very common issue. It's a common problem, not just within the trades, it's a common problem just in general. People generally don't really understand, even today when we know so much within healthcare around mental health and substance use. One of the things that consistently comes up, and one of the conversations that I have all the time with people, is that they just don't know how to access care. Not only do they don't know how to access care, they don't know what care is available. Often people don't even know how substance use is treated nowadays. We as healthcare professionals, I have to tell you, have done a really, really poor job of explaining how to get help for substance use issues or mental health issues. And I say this all the time, like we have learned so much in the last 10, 20 years around treating mental health and substance use issues. We've learned so much, we've come a long way in the way that we address mental health and substance use issues, yet we've done a really, really poor job of explaining that. So if you are struggling with mental health issues or substance use issues, one of the things that you'll notice immediately is we tend not to separate the two things anymore. And the reason for that is that we recognise that they go hand in hand. People that have poor mental health or are struggling with mental health issues, there is a huge correlation with substance use, that it can lead to substance use. And for a big chunk of people, that is where it tends to go. Now, I will say that for most people, it will be substance use that's increased for a while, but then comes back down again. So for many people, it's they just suddenly find that they're drinking a bit more, or they're using other substances just to manage a bit more. But they're usually able to kind of they may binge a bit more, but then they can pull that back and they're okay. But for some people, that does turn into more severe issues, and it turns into more chronic substance use. Now, if you're part of the construction industry, and if you're part of the BC building trades, and I'm fully aware from conversations with you, Lindsay, that not everybody will recognise whether they are part of the building trades association. If you're part of 13 particular unions that are part of the Building Trades Association, you will find that we are able to provide services to you. So if ever anybody has any mental health issues, they can just go onto our website, or they can just call our number and we'll be able to take it from there. We try and provide a one-stop shop. So basically you just call and then we will do the assessments and we'll guide you and help and work with you around what help's needed. But for most people, I would argue that most people don't have access to CIRP in reality, because there's a huge population of construction workers, women not in the trades, and they don't always know where to go to get help. The first port of call, I would say, is usually your physician. or most health authorities have what we call local health agencies. So you have a big health authority like Fraser Health, for example, and within Fraser Health, you're going to have a local health agency. For example, it might be Alouette Services, or it might be Surrey Services. So these all come under them. Now, within local health agencies, they usually have a mental health and substance use clinic or a team or a program that you can go and access services from. They do have, often they will have free services. The problem with the services that you often get from health agencies is that they are so swamped with the amount of services that need to be provided and the number of people that are accessing services. So there's often long waits, but that is definitely where you would go to get programs and help for any mental health issues or substance use issues.
And one of the things that I know is a huge concern for people all the time is how private is that information? Because as tradeswomen, we are often already a bit of a target on a construction site. Everyone watches what we're doing. Everyone scrutinizes everything we do. Yeah. And so then I can imagine like that is why that is a huge concern is for so many is like tradeswomen is then what if it gets out that they are struggling with addiction or mental health issues? How do we know that that isn't something that's going to impact our jobs?
I love that you've asked that question, and this is a concern not just for people that work in the trades, but for people generally, and that's the issue of confidentiality. So the first thing I'll start with, sorry, I've just got to tell you guys, everyone watching, I've got a train going past my house. There's no earthquake here, I'm good. So one of the first things I tell everybody, regardless of whether we're talking about in community or CIRP clients, is that we are bound under the Mental Health Act and under the Privacy Act as well, Personal Information and Protection Act, which means that we legally cannot give out information. So there's the baseline for you. Now, we know that when, just because something exists legally doesn't always mean that that happens in practice, right? Let's be honest, we know that, legally, we're not allowed to drive over a certain speed, but people do drive over a certain speed. So we know that those things happen. What I will always say is that within healthcare, and certainly within our organisation, we take the issue of confidentiality extremely seriously. We are funded by the industry, but one of the steps that we have taken as an agency and our board has been very, very supportive of is that we operate independently from the industry. So whilst we are funded by the industry, we do not report back to the industry. We, on a personal level, every single one of the clinicians that work for us takes the ethics of confidentiality very seriously. We actually follow the guidelines of the OIPC, which you may or may not be familiar with. That's the Office of the Information Privacy Commissioner. And so we follow the guidelines of that agency, and that really is quite tight. It's locked down everything. We don't even let people know that you may be a potential client. So if somebody called up and said, hey, I want to find out how Lindsay's doing, we wouldn't say, oh, Lindsay, we can't tell you about Lindsay. We wouldn't say that. What we'd actually say is, we can't tell you whether that person's a client or not. Right, and that is a standard response, and that's actually something that's written down in the OIPC as well. And it's our board of ethics that our clients, our clinicians are governed by. That's actually in their standards of practice as well.
And what if I needed to do something like go to a residential rehab care facility sort of situation? How could that be kept private?
So we don't report to anybody. The clients are our clients. So even if family members, and so this happens sometimes, family members will call in and they want to support their loved one, or they might even say, we want to send somebody to residential treatment, or we want someone to go to rehab. And we might, CIRP might cover the cost of that, but then the client may say, well, I want to go to this particular one that CIRP doesn't cover. So family members will sometimes pay part of the cost or even all of the cost. We will, even though they are paying, that doesn't give them the right to information, so we still don't give information. If somebody does need to go to treatment, residential treatment, all they need to do is give us a call. We will then do some of those assessments, and we will make a referral to a treatment centre. CIRP has we ordinarily purchase beds in treatment centres, and we have a number of beds that we would usually have in any treatment centre, and that is our beds, which means that it can stay empty or it can stay full, but nobody else has that. And so that allows us to provide access to our clients very quickly. And I should also say the programs that we referred to are what we call biopsychosocial programs. And so those are programs that are very much in line with evidence-based treatment. We know that the research now and the best practice guidelines for treatment of mental health and substance use issues now are that programs really should be a biopsychosocial model. And what that means is that it recognises that the program recognises that there's a biological basis, a psychological basis, and a sociological basis for substance use and mental health issues, actually. That you can't just look at substance use in an abstinence-based model alone, because there's actually more to it than simply abstaining from substances. Although that's a model that works for many people, and that's a model that we support as well if that's what the client wants to do.
That's really great. Thank you. That really answered a lot of my questions that I had about that. We do have another question coming in here that is from someone in the audience, and what they're wondering about, they're saying that their company is going to be stopping work from home and will be returning to the office starting at the beginning of next month. And so we're looking for guidelines for preparing for return to office life after being at home for so long. And I definitely, this resonates for me, because even sometimes I have to say, when I watch a television program and I see lots of people in close proximity, like at a concert, even just on the screen, I'm like, ooh, we shouldn't be doing that. And I feel a little apprehensive.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of guidelines, what I can't do is give guidelines on how. I think that's up to each individual company, organisation, union. Of course, they should be following the guidelines from our fantastic Dr. Bonnie Henry, who's amazing. Really should be following those guidelines. But in terms of how to manage that in terms of anxiety, I can imagine that that's very anxiety provoking. And listen, as healthcare professionals, we're not exempt from those anxieties. We feel them as well, even though we're mental health professionals, right? We feel those as well. I think with when you feel anxiety isn't always a bad thing, right? This is something that I think is, I have to tread carefully when I say that. Anxiety can be useful. It can help you prepare for things. It can help you to kind of make sure that your environment is safe, but it can also then tip into the not so helpful when it becomes chronic anxiety and it becomes crippling. And so the difference between the two, how do you know when you've gone from something that's quite reasonable and healthy and is a good warning system to you, to when it becomes really unhealthy? And the way to recognize that is when it suddenly starts to stop you from doing something, when it's got so bad that it's crippling you, right? Or when you can't, when you're having panic attacks before you go into work, or you're dreaming about things and you're having nightmares. If it goes on, I'd say for probably, if something goes on for you for more than 2 weeks, then you want to kind of look at that and go, okay, this is an extended period of time. Now, anxiety relies on the person having what we call an expansion of worry thoughts. So first off, anxiety requires a worry thought. You can't have anxiety if you don't have worries in your mind. And so we all worry about things. And that's fine. Worrying's not, it doesn't in and of itself become maladaptive. It's when that worry thought gets expanded. So let me give you an example. So you might say, I'm worried about going into work. It's given me a little touch of anxiety. That in and of itself is fine, right? Because it's going to help you be more alert. It's going to help you think about not being too close to the person next to you. It's going to help you to kind of voice that actually that practice isn't okay. So that's a healthy amount of anxiety. A worried thought then turns into an expansion of worry thoughts might be, well, what if I go into work and other people aren't standing close to me? What if they're not, they're not distancing? What if they go to work and they're so close that I actually get this virus? What if I don't get sick, but then I take it home and my child gets sick? What if my child gets sick? What if they end up in hospital? Oh my God, what if they end up in hospital? What then what then, and what then, and what then. And it's that expansion of worry thoughts. And so in order to keep healthy anxiety, and in order to manage your anxiety, one of the things you want to do is limit that thought expansion. You've got to get good at kind of saying at some point, hi. You've got to get used to at some point kind of going, okay, this is where I draw the boundaries on those worry thoughts. This is where I don't let them go beyond something I can manage. So making sure, so one of the things that I'd be working with clients on is making sure that you don't go beyond one, maybe 2 steps with those worry thoughts and no further. And so that's one of the things I'd be talking about in terms of managing anxiety at work when you go back. That's a really good question.
Yeah, and actually I have dealt with a lot of anxiety with people in my family, and one of the things that I've done with them is a whole bunch of work around acknowledging the worry thought out loud. I am worried about XYZ, and then giving yourself vote. And it sounds cheesy, but it actually is quite effective to say, but I know that I can keep myself as safe as possible by following the rules. And I realize some people are like, I'm not going to sit there and talk to myself. And I'm like, but it actually does help, especially like, and I have done that for all sorts of things when I'm going into a workplace and I know there's been some conflict there. I have sat in my work van outside the construction site or outside the building and actually said these things out loud to myself. I am stressed about XYZ, but I know that I am capable of taking care of myself and making smart decisions and things like that. It actually, it sounds so funny, but it is actually very effective.
So I'm sitting in, I'm silently kind of going, yay, that what you're doing is spot on. And I can actually talk to you through the science of why it's spot on. So it's actually exactly what I'd be doing with clients. And I actually call it topping and tailing, right? So what happens is you start off with your thought and you have that thought. Now, when we as everybody probably recognizes, we have thoughts that kind of just run through our brain constantly and we don't pay them much attention. But one of the many things I say to my clients is you will feel what you think and think what you feel, right? So you'll feel what you think and think what you feel. So if you have these worry thoughts that are running and you're paying no attention to them, but they're running, you will start to feel those thoughts. Right, so your body will start to have the stress chemical released. Your body will start to produce all of those anxiety-driven chemicals in your body, even though you're not paying much attention to them. That's why sometimes people are kind of, we've all had that experience where you've gone, I'm not sure why, but I've got this real kind of pit in my stomach and I don't even know why. Like who hasn't had that before? And that's because that worry thought is just running unchecked in your mind. By actually bringing your worry thought to the front of prefrontal cortex, to your awareness, what you're actually doing is bringing it out. You're actually saying it out loud, which means that you're giving all of your senses to it. So you're driving your attention to that. By saying it loud, your A is speaking it, your ears are hearing it, so it drives more attention and focus to that thought. So which is fantastic, which is why it's such a good strategy to use. In bringing that attention to it, the awesome thing that you're actually doing there, Lindsay, is actually capping it by saying, I am worried about, but. So you don't let that thought just run with just the worry. You counter condition that thought. That's what we would call that in psychology. So you are counter conditioning. So you have the worry thought, but you end it on a positive, even if you don't buy into it right now. You know damn well that you're just you're just kind of, oh, I'm still anxious, but you say that. And the reason you're doing that is so that when you re-embed that into the brain, when that goes back into the thought box, it's not sitting there as just a worry thought. It's sitting there with a good ending on it, which is, but I'll be fine. Or, and we come up with a whole load of those for our clients, what depending on the situation. So, I'm going back to work and I'm really worried about Corona because I have children at home. However, I recognize that we've taken good precautions. I also know that my team members are also very conscientious. So that's a good top and tail there. So you've got that ending in there, and that should bring down anxiety levels. Actually, I'm going to ask you, so when you do that, what does that do for you in your stomach when you do that practice?
Yeah, it is very effective, and sometimes it takes a few times. But I also have literally gone and found a private space while on a job to do it with no one else around, and just speak to myself quietly and say, "No, you can do this, and you are stressed right now, and everything feels really difficult, and it is going to be okay."
Yeah.
And it does actually, yeah, I found it really effective.
Yeah, it does. It does. Now, the other part of that, which I love, is what's going on in your brain when you do that. When you do that repeatedly, there's this there's a term for what's happening in your brain. We call it neuroplasticity. And so what's happening is the way that we think in our brain, the way that what everybody listening, and I really hope, I'd love to hear from you guys, even if it's just to say yes or no, I disagree with you, whatever it is. But what I would love to hear is when people think, we tend to think in the same kind of vein frequently, like the same kind of patterns of thinking tend to go on in our brains, and that's not accidental, and that's not just, that's not just random. It's there deliberately because we have neurons that fire, they connect with each other, and when they connect, that's how our thoughts are happening, right? So they're connecting, and there's always almost like neural highways, neural pathways we call them, but it's like, I always say, it's like a highway. It's well traveled, and that's where our thoughts will travel down because it's like a pathway. When you do something like, say, I'm very anxious, because that's what your thoughts are running, right? That's how your brain's wired to connect and think. But when you say I'm anxious, however, I'm going to be okay, that's suddenly novel. That's a new way of thinking. So rather than having that two neurons fire together that usually are thinking about worry thoughts, they will fire, a new one will fire, a separate one will fire that's different to the one that you usually fire, which says, but I'm going to be okay. And then when you do that time and time again, you develop a new neural pathway, and your brain will naturally, as long as you are consistent. And Lindsay, I bet the first time you did it is completely different to when you do it now. I bet it's easier for you to do now, right? And the reason for that is these new neural pathways are connecting, and they're getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And the old neural pathway, which was about I'm worried, I'm worried, I'm worried, and nothing else, is beginning to fade out. It's beginning to disappear because this new one's getting stronger, and it gets easier for you to feel better because your brain is actually firing in that new way. So you can see I get very excited about this.
This is exciting.
I do. I get terribly jazzed by all of this.
We do have another question here from the audience, and it is, when taking time off isn't an option, how do you fortify yourself when you've already been stressed to the max for the next big challenge, when the pace of big stressors has been relentless and it doesn't feel like there's any end in sight?
Yeah. So this is not, I mean, this isn't uncommon. Hey, listen, I struggle with that as well. You know, when you get stressed, but you know damn well you can't take time off. You can't take time off for a myriad of different reasons. What do you do? What you've actually got to do is start setting up boundaries for yourself, real boundaries. And you've got to be able to say, okay, so I'm going to start chunking my day off into sections. Right, so from this time to this time is my work time. From this time to this time is my time. And you actually do have to schedule it off, and you have to plan it out. If you just kind of leave it vague, it's less likely to happen. And the thing to do is to really have, I don't know this person's situation, whether they're alone at home or whether they have children. Either way, it's really about finding time to recharge. How can you start recharging some of that? Now, that's self-care, so you need to increase some of that and actually schedule it in. We often, as clinicians, one of the things that we'll talk to clients about is their self-care box, right? So this is a box that you have that's got all your things in that make you feel good. So it might be a bubble bath. And as insipid as that might sound, as soppy as that might sound, the benefits you get from that are huge, right? Just being able to put some candles on, some essence, sit in a bubble bath, you'll be amazed at what that does for you. The other thing to remember is touch, right? So touch, we have a chemical that's released in our bodies when we are touched. It's something that we can't control. It happens naturally. And that chemical is oxytocin. It's often called the love chemical, but it's almost the antidote to stress. right? So it's the complete opposite of stress. It makes us feel loved, it makes us feel calm, it makes us feel very, very good inside. So a massage, booking massages is a great way to do that. If you have a partner who can do that for you, even better. So scheduling some me time, scheduling some self-care time is super important. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is really to maybe get the help of a mental health professional. You can actually do this. You can Google it. You can get some podcasts. You can get some apps that can help you with this. But what you want to start doing is stress, remember, stress is not actually an external thing. This is something that people don't often realize. We will often say work is stressful. Actually, that's technically, and I hate to say this and I hope I don't get into trouble, but it's actually incorrect. Stress is actually your physiological response to a trigger, whatever that trigger is. So it's not that work is stressful, it's actually the way that you function or the way that your thoughts are running. It's a response to a trigger. Stress is always internal, which is a good thing and a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. I think it's fantastic because if it's internal, it means I have 100% control over it, right? That's why I love it. And a lot of it is, remember the earlier thing I was saying, which is you feel what you think and you think what you feel, right? So you are feeling that stress based on the cognitions that are going on in your mind. And the reason that they're going on in that way is because you have those neural pathways that are wired to think that way. So your job, if you really want to start bringing down some of that stress, is to change, even though you don't believe it or feel it initially, it takes a bit of time to start getting those new neural pathways connected. You can speak to, again, mental health professionals, or you can use podcasts that can help you do that. Now, the other thing that really works, and the World Health Organization has actually stated that mindfulness is even better than antidepressants. And actually, there's tons and tons of research that's beginning to point that way. Tons of it. Mindfulness, and you can get loads and loads of apps, free apps online that you can download, and you just plug into your ears, and all you've got to do is follow it, and that's all you have to do is just follow it. Mindfulness, again, produces all of those chemicals that are an antidote to stress. So they're the opposite, they cancel out. So you can't feel really calm and zen and feel stressed at the same time, right? I challenge all of you, you can't. You'll either feel stressed or you feel zen, one or the other. So what you want to do is really increase the things that can help you zen out, that can help you calm the brain. And what happens is that we know when you have mindfulness, there's actually neurochemistry that happens in the brain. There's the stress hormones disappear and the happy hormones start to be secreted. We know that the blood pressure comes down. We know that the brain waves start to elongate. Brain waves elongating are really, really good. So when we are stressed, we've all seen the movies, right? When someone's in a coma in one of these movies that we watch, and they're hooked up to a machine, and so they get stressed in their coma and their brain waves start doing this, right? We've all seen that. So that's not good. When your brain waves are doing that, that's not a good thing. So, but when you are doing mindfulness, and if you're hooked up to a machine, what you'd actually see is your brain waves, where they were doing that, they now start to do this. They elongate. And when they elongate, that is when all the good chemicals are being released in the brain. So when stress comes up, there's a couple of things to remember. It's totally 100% in your control to change that, which is fantastic, and that is a really good thing to remember. Second part of that is you want to start changing some of the thoughts that go along with it, and then increase self-care and maybe look at mindfulness. Mindfulness is a really, really good tool, really good tool for that.
One of the things that I've been doing for self-care, and I've found has really helped with the stress of these past few weeks of this pandemic, is seeking out community, and in particular, having a chance to just have a chat session with other particular tradeswomen I know who are in similar circumstances to myself, trying to work from home, have little kids, and I can't fix her problem, she can't fix mine, but having a chance just to chat on the phone or via video and be like, it's amazing how much that makes me feel seen. It makes me feel heard. It doesn't change anything in terms of the external pressures, but it makes it feel manageable.
Exactly. And it's all internal, right? So it really makes you feel, it calms you down. It makes you feel really, really more relaxed and connected to it. And we had a session on loneliness as well, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago? And so being connected with other people is huge. We're not designed as human beings to be isolated. I know, Lindsay, you and I have had this conversation before about introverts and extroverts. And I think there's this very old view of introversion and extroversion that exists out there, and that is that introverts just like to be alone and extroverts need to be outside, and that's actually not how we understand that those two terms anymore. So introverts require more recharging time, extroverts require less recharging, or rather they recharge in different ways, I should say. So as an extrovert, you might recharge by connecting with people. As an introvert, you might recharge by just having a bit of quietness. And it's got nothing to do with whether or not you're social or not social. And so I'm not quite sure why I digressed there, but I think part of this was around the connectedness with other human beings, and making sure that we are connected to other people. That's super important, and that can really help with stress as well, for sure.
If you liked our video and you want to see more like it, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel.